Hello everyone, my name is Timothy Robert Icelia from Group 6 together with my colleague Mr. Vince Ina, Jefferson Inojas, Edward Ferreter and Chassis Flores. And today we will be tackling about the good life. And before we proceed, we have first the lesson objectives. At the end of this lesson, the students should be able to examine what is meant by a good life and identify how humans attempt to attain what is deemed to be a good life and recognize possibilities available to human being to attain the good life. So in ancient Greece, long before the word science has been coined, the need to understand the world and reality was bound with the need to understand the self and the good life. And for Plato, the task of understanding the things in the world runs parallel with the job of truly getting into what will make the soul flourish. And in an attempt to understand reality and the external world, man must seek to understand himself too. So it was Aristotle who gave a definitive distinction between the theoretical and practical sciences. There is a big difference, or there is a big far-fetch between theoretical and practical. Among the theoretical disciplines, Aristotle included logic, the biology, physics, metaphysics are among them. And among the practical ones, on the other hand, Aristotle counted ethics and politics, and whereas truth is the aim of the theoretical sciences, and the good is the end goal of the practical ones. So every attempt to know is connected in some way in attempt to find flourishing. And one must find the truth about what the good is and the good, Aristotle, and how we all aspire for a good life. It is interesting to note that the first philosopher who approached the problem of reality from a scientific lens, as we know, is now also the first thinker who is dabbled into the complex of problematization of the end goal of life, which is happiness. And this man is none other than Plato, as expected. And Aristotle, for his part, disagreed with his teacher position and forwarded the idea that there is no reality over and above the senses can perceive. And as such, it is only by observation, again by observation of the external world, that one can truly understand what reality is all about. And we, along with all other entities in the world, start as potentialities and move toward actualities. And the movement, of course, entails change. And consider a seed that eventually germinates and grow into a plant. The seed that turned to be the plant underwent change from the potential plant that is the seed to its full actuality, the plant. And no individual, young or old, fat or skinny, male or female, resist happiness. We all, we all want to be happy. Yes, that is true. And Aristotle claims that happiness is the be all and end of all everything that we do, and we may not realize it, but the end goal of everything that we do is happiness. And if you ask one person why he is doing, he may not readily say that it is happiness that motivates him. Hard pass to explain why he is motivated by that motivates him will reveal the happiness in the grand motivating force in everything that he does. And when Aristotle claims that we want to be happy, he does not necessarily mean that everyday happiness that we obtain when we win in a competition or we get our favorite dish in a restaurant. While Aristotle actually means is a human flourishing, a kind of contentment in knowing that is one is getting the best out of life, and a kind of a feeling that one has maxed out his potential in the world, that he has attained the crux of his humanity.
So good day guys, I am Jefferson Arenas from AMT second year Alpha, and I'm going to report the happiness as the goal of a good life. So, happiness as the goal of a good life in the 18th century, John Stuart Mill declared the greatest happiness principle by saying that an action is right as far as it maximizes the attainment of happiness for the greatest number of people. At a time when people were skeptical about claims on the metaphysical, people could not make sense of the human flourishing that Aristotle talked about in the days of old. So John Stuart Mill wrote an essay about utilitarianism. It is a theory which advocates actions that foster happiness and opposed actions that cause unhappiness. Utilitarianism promotes the greatest amount of good for the greatest number of people. He wrote it to provide support for the value of utilitarianism as a moral theory, and to respond to misconceptions about it. Mill defines utilitarianism as a theory based on the principle that actions are right in proportion as they tend to promote happiness, wrong as they tend to produce the reverse of happiness. Mill defines happiness as pleasure and the absence of pain. He argues that pleasure can differ in quality and quantity, and that pleasures that are rooted in one's higher faculties should be weighted more heavily than baser pleasures. Furthermore, Mill argues that people's achievement of goals and ends, such as virtuous living, should be counted as part of their happiness. While to Aristotle, happiness consists in achieving through the course of whole lifetime, like all the goods, health, wealth, knowledge, friends, etc., that lead to the perfections of human nature and the enrichment of human life. This requires us to make choices, some of which may be very difficult. That motivates him. Hard-pressed to explain why he is motivated by that, by what motivates him will reveal that happiness is the grand, motivating force in everything that he does. When Aristotle claims that we want to be happy, he does not necessarily mean that the everyday happiness that we obtain when we win a competition or we cut our favorite dish in a restaurant. What Aristotle actually means is human flourishing, a kind of contentment in knowing that one is getting the best out of life, and a kind of feeling that one has maxed out his potentials in the world, that he has attained the crux of his humanity. So next is the materialism. Materialism is a movement of thought about the nature of being which considers that there is no other substance but matter, and that thought and self-consciousness are secondary products of matter of illusions. Materialism rejects the existence of soul, of the next world, and of God, being opposed to spiritualism and idealism. The materialist philosophy is closely related to the development of science, whose result improve its capacities to evolve and to structure itself in the course of centuries. Therefore, materialism covers several forms that go from atomism of the Greek philosophers to modern science. Its various trends are characterized by the way in which they conceive spirit, self-consciousness, or mental entity. The atomist philosophers thought that universe and matter are only made up of atoms, invisible particles assembled by chance and in the purely way purely mechanical way. The founders of this theory was the Greek philosopher Leucippus and his disciple Democritus. For them, the formation of world and life are explained by positions, movements, collisions, and associations of these atoms that are the only reality. Soul is a kind of fire made up of atoms suspended in the air and that disintegrates at the time of death. They were the first materialists and atomists in ancient Greece, who led a school whose primary belief is that the world is made up of and is controlled by the tiny invisible units in the world called atomos or seeds. For Democritus and his disciples, the world, including human beings, is made up of matter. There is no need to posit immaterial entities as sources of purpose. Atomos simply comes together randomly to form the things in the world. As such, only material entities matter in terms of human flourishing. Matter is what makes us attain happiness. We see this at work with most people who are clinging onto material wealth as the primary source of the meaning of their existence. And that's all for materialism. Thank you. Stop.
Hedonism. So, hedonists, for their part, see the end goal of life in acquiring pleasure. Pleasure has always been the priority of hedonists. For them, life is about obtaining and indulging in pleasure because life is limited. The mantra of this school of thought is the famous eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Led by Epicurus, this school of thought also does not buy any notion of afterlife, just like the materialists. Hedonists just simply tells us that we only have one life and the best way to live is to acquire pleasure, which means that we do the things that could give us satisfaction and enjoyment. For me, I enjoy watching TV series, reading books, hanging out with my friends, because those things are good. Those things gives me the happiness or the enjoyment it gives me the relief of anything that I'm going through. So that's hedonism. It's all about pleasure, pleasure over something else or anything else. Stoicism, another school of thought led by Epicurus. The Stoics espoused the idea that to generate happiness, one must learn to distance oneself and be apathetic. The original term apatheia precisely means to be indifferent. For the Stoics, happiness can only be attained by a careful practice of apathy. We should, in this worldview, adapt the fact that some things are not within our control. The sooner we realize this, the happier we can become. So Stoicism for me is all about we are not in control of what happens in the past, but on how we respond to the future, which is the present. For example, let's say you have failed your exam to one of your subjects, and you just going to be disappointed and being a failure, or are you going to bounce back, study and work smarter and harder, and or change your learning style? That's one of the example of on how you could give respond to what happens in the past. So that's one of the example of Stoicism. And you could also give a respond with a virtue. So there's 4 virtues for the Stoics. First is the wisdom, second is the justice, third is the temperance, and fourth is the courage.
So, theism, most people find the meaning of their lives using God as a fulcrum of their existence. The Philippines, as a predominantly Catholic country, is witness to how people base their life goals on beliefs that hinge on some form of supernatural reality called heaven. The ultimate basis of happiness for theists is the communion with God. The world where we are in is only just a temporary reality where we have to maneuver around while waiting for the ultimate return to the hands of God. So that is theism. So moving on with the humanism. Humanism is another school of thought espouses the freedom of a man to carve his own destiny and legislate his own laws, free from the shackles of a God that monitors and controls. For humanists, man is literally the captain of his own ship. Inspired by the Enlightenment and 17th century humanists see themselves not merely as stewards of the creation, but as individuals who are in control of themselves and the world outside them. This is the spirit of most scientists who thought that the world is a place and space for freely unearthing the world in seeking for ways on how to improve the lives of its inhabitants. As a result of the motivation of the humanist current, scientists eventually turned to technology in order to ease the difficulty of life as illustrated in the previous lessons. Scientists of today, meanwhile, are ready to confront more sophisticated attempts at altering the world for the benefit of humanity. Some people now are willing to temper time and space in the name of technology. Social media, as an example, has been so far a very effective way of employing technology in purging with time and space. Not very long ago, communication between two people from two continents in the planet will involve months of waiting for a mail to arrive. Seeing each other real time while talking was virtually impossible. Now, communication between two people wherever they are is not just possible but easy. The internet and smartphones made real time communication possible not just between two people but even with multiple people simultaneously. Technology allowed us to tinker with our sexuality. Biologically, male individuals can now undergo medical operation if they so wish for sexual reassignment. Breast implants are now available and can be done with relative convenience if anyone wishes to have one. Hormones can be also injected in order to alter the sexual chemicals in the body. Whether or not we agree with these technological advancements, these are undertaken in the hopes of attaining the good life. The balance, however, between the good life, ethics, and technology has to be attained. So that's for all for the humanism. Let's move on for the brief summary that will be reported to Vince and Ad. Thank you.
Man is constantly in pursuit of the good life. Now, every person has his perspective when it comes to what comprises the good life. Throughout history, man has worked hard in order to point out what amounts to a good and happy life. Now, some people, like the classic theorists, thought that happiness has to do with the insides of the human person. The soul, as the seat of our humanity, has been the focus of attention of this end goal. The soul has to attain a certain balance in order to have a good life, a flourishing life. It was only until the 17th century that happiness became a centerpiece in the lives of people, even becoming a full-blown ethical foundation in John Stuart Mill's utilitarianism. At present, we see multitudes of schools of thought that all promise their own key to finding happiness. Science and technology have been, for the most part, at the forefront of man's attempts at finding happiness. The only question at the end of the day is whether science is taking the right path toward attaining what it really means to live a good life. So at the end of the day, it all comes down to you and to what you believe is a good life. No matter what you believe in, or what you choose to believe in, as long as it brings you happiness, and gives you a sense of fulfillment without harming those around you, then who is to say what a good life really is other than you? So it is only simply your choice and your decision that defines what a good life really is.